On the morning of the 1st of February 2021, this woman, who was a fitness instructor, did her morning exercises in Burma's capital city of Nay Pyi Taw, not realising that behind her back, these heavily armed SUVs were heading straight towards the parliament, driving past on their way to arrest the country's civilian leadership. This was a coup. This confirmed many reports which believed this would happen. But why did this happen? Why are people protesting against it? And what has been the international response? Firstly, Burma, more known now commonly as Myanmar, or officially the Republic of the Union of Myanmar, is a country in Southeastern Asia. Just larger than Afghanistan in Central Asia, but smaller than Zambia in Southern Africa. It borders 5 countries, China to its north and northeast, India to its northwest, Thailand to its southeast along with Laos, and finally sharing a short border with Bangladesh. This we will talk a little bit about later about what happens around this border. Now finally, it shares a coastline along with Bay of Bengal to its southwest, and the Andaman Sea to its south. The country of Burma is not unfamiliar to military rule. The country has a very long and rich history, with many different old Burmese kingdoms, but for this video we need to go back to the mid-1940s. At the time, Burma was under British rule, being a colony up until this point. However, the country had just suffered under a brutal military occupation under the Japanese during World War II, which had set up a puppet state, and they spread the idea that the Burmese should become independent. They even let the Burmese form their own independence army which fought with the Japanese during the war. But after Britain won World War II, the country was practically bankrupt and could no longer afford maintaining these colonies, so the British authorities agreed that Burma should become independent along with its other colonies in the region. On August the 14th, 1947, neighbouring East Pakistan became independent along with the western half as well. The next day, so did neighbouring India. So following these developments, on January 4th, 1948, Burma finally became independent, officially called the Union of Burma, with Rangoon, now known as Yangon, as its capital. The country was majority Buddhist, but with many other religions in the country, including Christians, Muslims, some from tribal religions, and Hindus. Dozens of different ethnic groups as shown on this map. The majority ethnic group of the country are the Burma people that make up roughly about 68% of the population. Now officially there are over 135 distinct other ethnic groups, however estimates are even higher than this, as this is only what the government officially recognises. And so after independence, many of these ethnic minorities took up arms because they didn't want to live under this new country, instead fighting either for a high degree of autonomy or outright independence. What was worse was that the country was also fighting Burmese communists and anti-communist Chinese insurgents as well, which used northern Burma as a base to raid communist China. This meant that the country was incredibly unstable, fighting constantly against all these different groups at once. So from 1948 to 1958, the country was led by a civilian government under the AFPFL, or Anti-Fascist People's Freedom League. However, the party split due to infighting, and General Lee Win, the commander of Burma's army, was asked to serve as interim prime minister to sort things out and hold elections. After the military served a brief 2 years in power, the country held elections, and Thein Kin Nu won the election. The military then handed power back to the civilian government. However, this time this was short-lived. Just 2 years later, General Lee Win staged a coup and retook power, becoming Prime Minister, declaring that parliamentary democracy was not suitable for Burma due to its many problems. The new regime under him suspended the constitution and dissolved legislature. He then founded the Burma Socialist Programme Party, which became the only legal party 2 years later in 1964. From then on, he faced minor opposition from mainly students protesting at universities in small areas of the country. That was up until 1988. Nobody really had enough power to challenge them, however the insurgencies did still continue. In 1988, massive protests broke out, this time all over the country. This was dubbed the 8888 Uprising. This was led by a woman you most likely have heard of, Aung San Suu Kyi, a lady who was the daughter of a well-known Burmese independence activist. She became very popular speaking out against the crimes of the regime, such as corruption and their mismanagement of the country. These concerns were widely felt by the people of Burma. After the coup in 1962, the country closed off its economy to the rest of the world. When this finally reopened in 1988, the country was marked as the least developed country in all of Southeast Asia by the United Nations. And so under this intense pressure to reform, the military agreed to multi-party elections and to give up most of its power and influence over the country. A year later, Aung San Suu Kyi was placed under house arrest and the country's official name was changed from Burma to Myanmar. In the first free and fair elections in 3 decades, Aung San Suu Kyi and her newly formed party, the NLD, the National League for Democracy, won easily with over 58% of the vote, beating the military-backed party, which only won just over 21% of the vote. However, the military refused to recognise the result, arguing the election was really about setting up a constitutional convention for the country, and they would hold on to power fearing that the country would fall apart if it didn't. In 1991, while still under house arrest, Aung San Suu Kyi would receive the Nobel Peace Prize. From then on, pressure on the military to hold elections continued to rise, and finally in 2003, the military government issued its roadmap to democracy. In 2007, massive protests broke out yet again. Finally, a year later, the military made a constitution in 2008 and agreed to hold elections in 2010. During this time, they also moved the capital city from Yangon to Nay Pyi Taw. The Union Solidarity and Development Party, a military-backed party, won the election as the NLD refused to participate in the election as a protest against the constitution, which had a clause in it which stopped her from becoming the president. The NLD also disliked that the constitution gave the military a guaranteed 25% of the seats in the parliament. However, in 2015, Burma would have another election. This time the NLD did participate in the elections, and this time they easily won, gaining many seats in the parliament. They took power and ruled the country up until 2020, when new elections were held again, resulting in a victory for the NLD. However, the military cried voter fraud this time, claiming that there was enough fraud to dismiss the elections. On the 1st of February 2021, the military finally stepped in, arresting Aung San Suu Kyi and members of her government and declaring a 1-year state of emergency. Now, the people of Burma began protesting almost immediately, literally a day after the coup the first protests began. Most people are extremely concerned over a return to military rule. Although the army is promising fresh elections, it is also currently drafting an internet law which critics say will censor opposition. Finally, the international response has been mixed. Russia and China have largely remained muted when it comes to the coup, largely because Russia has sold many weapons to the military along with China. However, the military doesn't have the best relations with either Russia or China, as both refused to use its veto power at the UN, condemning the violence against protesters. Although recently China seems to actually be improving its relations with the Burmese military government, not even calling the coup a coup, but rather a cabinet reshuffle. Although it did allow the condemnation to pass, it did water it down using less strong language. This is mostly because China has significant economic interests in Burma. Its so-called Belt and Road Initiative aims to boost its economy by diversifying where it gets its natural resources from. So for example, most of China's goods go through the Strait of Malacca, which is heavily under influence by the United States and India, both of which are historical rivals to China and still are today. Burma plays a vital role in this as it becomes a major new trade route for raw materials to come into China. It has signed countless economic deals with the Burmese government, however this was with the civilian government. So because of this coup, the Chinese government is said to be concerned what will happen to these agreements now that the military has taken over. This is most likely why it's downplaying the coup, to hopefully develop a good relationship with the military leadership so that they will not change the status quo. Neighbouring India has a similar view. On the one hand, India's government would much prefer to deal with the civilian government, as it has historically had a hard time communicating with other nations that have a heavy military presence within the government. On the other hand though, both the military of Burma and India have cooperated in each other's insurgencies in both countries. You see, India is also fighting insurgent groups in the eastern part of the country, and Burma's military has helped them through training and exercises. Burma's neighbours to the east, such as Thailand and Laos, have remained silent on the issue, hoping to not provoke the new military regime. Thailand in particular is in a very difficult position due to its long border with Burma. It's said to have provided medical aid to injured people, however there are many allegations that it has rejected many Burmese refugees, sometimes even violently. Whilst Bangladesh has expressed its concerns, but has too many issues on its plate already dealing with the Rohingya refugees from Burma, where allegedly the Burmese military has committed terrible atrocities, forcing them to flee to Bangladesh. Now, the West opposes the coup and have placed sanctions on the country's generals who took part in the coup. More specifically, the US President Joe Biden has directly called out the military for launching the coup, urging the country to return to democracy. However, as you can see through this history, that looks very unrealistic. Although the military have pledged to hold elections next year in 2022, many people have doubts to this being the case. In fact, there are more and more reports that some protesters that really don't believe that there will be a new election are joining the various insurgent groups throughout Burma. sparking fears this will soon turn into a civil war. Let's hope that that doesn't happen and that Burma can reach a quick peaceful solution to this crisis. Now I hope you enjoyed this video. I found it very interesting to delve into Burmese history and politics. This video took ages to make, so I would strongly appreciate it if you click the like button, shared this video with people interested on this topic. Check out my other video where I covered the protest in Belarus. I'll leave a link to that at the end of this video. Feel free to tell me of any other video you think I should do, and as always, thank you for watching this video.